Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Tonight on the Timbuktu Report, Dr. Rick Stevenson is away on assignment. We pray that he has safe travels and a successful venture in Wyoming, Michigan. But tonight, I am very honored all the way from Robbins, Illinois, just south of Chicago. My guest tonight is a man who is a historian. He's the curator of a museum in Robbins, Illinois, Mr. Tyrone Haymore. How are you, Mr. Tyrone Haymore?
Fine. Thank you.
It is so exciting what's going on in Robbins. You know, very few African Americans don't know somebody that moved from the South to Chicago. And one of the first places that I heard about was Harvey, Illinois, and Robbins, Illinois. But was quite surprised when I met you. You came to my sister Catherine's service in May of this year in Chicago. I thank you for doing that. You're a friend of my sister Frances. So I really appreciate you honoring our family and coming to my sister Catherine's memorial service. But you were telling me, me about Robbins. Mm-hmm. And the significant things about Robbins, Illinois, the first African-American built and owned airport, a community that was settled by African-Americans in 1892, governed by African-Americans. How in the world did a town that was so pivotal in America's history of the African-American miss the pages of our history books?
That's a good question. I guess because nobody thought it was history. That's the only thing I can think of. It wasn't at that time. It just took time to develop the history, what it is now. And that's what we're trying to do, is capture it and let the people know, because some really incredible things have happened here with the small Black community of African Americans that started in 1892, right? During the time of the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago.
Right. Mm-hmm. And a community governed by African Americans. You know, yeah. we make a big deal about African Americans being elected in the latter part of the 19th, 20th century, but there were communities that were started and governed by Black people shortly after the Emancipation Proclamation, and Robbins being one of them. That's it is like the sixth oldest African-American community in the United States.
There are a little over 300 communities in the United States today that are incorporated and governed by Black officials, and it's predominantly a Black community. Robbins is the sixth oldest of all of the over 300 Black towns that exist today. The first one was in Illinois also, which was Brooklyn, Illinois.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, Brooklyn, Illinois. Sometimes they refer to it as Lovejoy, Illinois. And actually, there was a Black town before that don't exist anymore. It was called New Philadelphia, Illinois. It was the very first incorporated Black town in the United States.
Is that right?
Yes.
So what happened? What happened to New Philadelphia?
A man named McWhorter was the one a Black man named McWhorter was the one who started it. What we know is now they do have a book out now about it, coming out of the University of Illinois, and but it was a Black town laid out, and they have got a big grant to literally unearth it. It doesn't exist anymore, but the foundations are there. There's a lot of evidence that it's there. Railroad. They have plats of survey that was done on the place, and but I don't ask me how it ended or why it went out of existence. I can't answer that. It is in a book now that's coming out. But the town that next was developed and that is recorded is Brooklyn, Brooklyn, Illinois, not New York. It's right across the river from St. Louis, Missouri. And
Is it next to East St. Louis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in that area. Brooklyn, Illinois is currently the oldest still continuous Black town in America. It's number one. And number 2, I used to know him by heart, is Princeville, North Carolina. Is number 2, and number 3 is I used to know him in order. Mine getting
That's
kind of
okay. That's okay. But I want to talk about Robbins.
okay. All right. Well,
The,
Robbins
the,
is
ho-
number 6.
the home of the first African American built airport and aviation school,
Yeah.
the home of the world famous Tuskegee Airmen. We know about the Tuskegee Airmen, but where
Right.
in the world did they learn to fly?
It's
And some of them came out of the Black owned aviation school right there in Robbins, Illinois.
right. This is a picture I'm going to show you here of the Robin. This is one of only 2 pictures or 3 pictures that was ever taken of the airport before it was destroyed by a violent windstorm in 1933. But it was opened in 1931 by 2 men, including this man here on the end. This man on the end is John C. Robinson, but it was 2 men altogether that started it. His partner, I'll show you another. Here's another photograph of John Robinson. That's a kind of a professional looking picture of him. But he is the lead one. His partner was Cornelius Coffey. And I think I have a photograph of Cornelius Coffey or somewhere. But the 2 men, they started out as auto mechanics. They were both from the South. They were both born in 1903, which was the same year that aviation was born, by the way. And Coffey came from Newport, Arkansas, and Robinson came from actually Carabel, Florida. But he was just a baby when his father died, and his mother moved quickly to Gulfport, Mississippi. And he was really raised in Gulfport, Mississippi. And from Gulfport, Mississippi, that he went to Tuskegee Institute and in college and has his automotive degree. Is the degree in auto mechanics. And so in those days, and we're talking about 1924. In those days, if you had any kind of trained auto mechanic, you made your way to where they build cars, and that was Detroit, Michigan. That's for the big job with the big money. And that's where he met his buddy, Cornelius Coffey, who had a similar background, was born the same year, 1903, from Newport, Arkansas. And they both made their way to Detroit, Michigan, is where they met. And it was in 1926, I believe it was, that Betsy Coleman, the world's first Black female pilot, had got her license in Europe and came back to the United States to open up an aviation school for Blacks. But she was raising money raise the money to build her organization when she fell with an accident in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. She was practicing for a fundraising event and in the airplane, and she accidentally fell out of the airplane while she was practicing a wing walk. And something happened. The cables got switched inside somehow or another, and it flipped the plane over. She fell out to her death. And that, of course, made the headline news everywhere, including Detroit. And John Robinson and Cornelius Coffey read this in the paper, and they knew about it. They heard about her, Betsy Coleman being a Black female pilot, and the first, as far as they knew at that time. And they said, well, wow, if a Black woman can fly an airplane, shouldn't a Black man ought to be able to fly an airplane? Yeah, but we got to go to France to do it because they weren't teaching Blacks aviation in this country because of segregation rules and policies. So Mr. Robinson said that there is an aviation school in Chicago he was aware of. He said, why don't we write to them and see if we can get enrolled, and we could go there. And what we can do, we can take up what Betsy Coleman left off. She wanted to build an aviation school for Blacks, and man, if we do this thing right, we could make a lot of money for ourselves, a good career. And so that's what they did. They went to Chicago. They mailed their application in. It was received, and but when they arrived in person to see how of their acceptance, the people at it was called the Curtis Wright Aeronautical University, which the building still exists in Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And when they went in, they said, "But you guys are Black. You're Negroes." Well, what about it? He said, well, we don't accept Negroes in our school. Can you imagine that in Chicago in 1926?
Well,
Unbelievable.
why do you say, can I imagine it in Chicago in the
I don't
1920s?
know. This is the North. I thought when the Civil War ended, everybody wanted to get to the North because the North was supposed to be free and the South was supposed to be slavery.
I know. And see, that is the story that has been perpetuated. But as you well know, Dr. Martin Luther King said Chicago was one of the most segregated cities that he had been
Right.
to. And
Yeah.
then when you hear about the work that Frederick Douglass was doing, he was speaking out on behalf of Negroes in the
Right.
North, because free Negroes in the North were still being oppressed. But in the
Yeah.
history books, it made it look like the only place there was racism was in the South. I used to live in Chicago, so I
Yeah.
know what Chicago was like in 1981,
Okay. Well,
as you know how it is in 2021.
yeah. And it was so anyway, of course, Robinson and Coffee was upset. They had sent their money in, their application to start enrolling in the aviation school in Chicago. And then when they got there and discovered they were Black, they were refused admittance. They were upset. And Coffee said, well, I don't know. We got to find out more about how we can rectify this. On their way out of the building that day, Robinson noticed a bulletin board displaying advertising for a janitor's position in the school. And they were advertising a job opening for a janitor position. He said, I wonder, do they discriminate against Blacks being janitors? And he said, I don't know, go back to the counter and see if he'll give you an application for that job and tell you that no, because you're Black. He went back to the counter, and to their surprise, the clerk said, yes, you can apply for that. And it's possible you may get that job. Here's the application. He did. He applied. He made the application. In fact, he made the application out right then and there. And believe it or not, he got accepted.
Huh.
But Robinson went home. He said, if I can just get inside that school and there's a janitor, that will give me a chance to clean up the classrooms while they're teaching and while they're doing it. And I could probably learn a lot like that. And that's exactly what he did. He would sweep up the classrooms. Sometimes while they were having class, and he was constantly eavesdropping on what the instructor was telling the students. And he was watching. And at night when the class was empty and he had to empty the garbage cans in the incinerator, instead of putting those papers in the incinerator, he collected them and took them to his apartment in Chicago. He began to read and study everything he could about aviation. One day he found a manual in there that says you could order a kit and build your own small airplane in your backyard. It was called a Heath Parasol plane, but it cost $600, $300 for the kit to build a plane and a separate $300 for the engine. Now, $600 in those days was equivalent to about $6,000 or more. He didn't have that kind of money, but he had enough money to buy the plane and start putting it together. And he had a garage on the south side, an auto shop garage on the south side of Chicago. So he ordered the plane with the $300. He said, well, we don't have to get the engine. We'll figure that out later. So he said, let's just get the plane in here and build it and see what we can do with that. They ordered the plane arrived, the kit, his men in the shop began helping him put the plane together. They put it together. Cables, dials, machine, everything, wings, what have you. Now it came time for the engine. They still didn't have the $300 extra for the engine. But Robinson, being as smart as he was, he looked in the manual that came with the plane. And according to the information in there about the specs on what the motor required, the engine, the numbers and all that stuff, he noticed that the requirements of the engine there matched very closely up with the engine that's in a motorcycle. And he said, I have a motorcycle. I wonder if that'll work. He said, these are some of the same specs that is in my motorcycle. He pulled the engine out of his motorcycle and he retrofitted it to work on that plane. And when they started it up, the propeller actually turned.
Wow.
And this was incredible. So anyway, while he was at the school as a janitor, he went back, he befriended one of these instructors there, Mr. Snyder. He said, Mr. Snyder, he said, I built an airplane in my garage, a small airplane. He said, you did what? In other words, black people can't read and can't understand that kind of complication. You built an airplane in your garage on 47th Street? He said, yes. He said, oh, I got to see it. He said, well, that's why I'm talking now. I want you to come out and look at it. I want you, a professional aviator, to come out and inspect and see how well we did, or if we did it right, or if we did it wrong. He said, I'll be out. He went out to 47th Street. Now, this is a white man. And he looked at this plane. He said, this is a Heath Parasol. I'm familiar with this plane. He said, you can order this kit. Yeah. He said, this is a little small plane. He said, everything. He said, I'm looking at the dials look okay. The cables look all right. Your wings and your elevator is looking fine. He said, but what is this strange looking engine you got in here? He said, this is not the engine that comes with this plane. I'm familiar with that. He said, no, it's my motorcycle engine. He said, your motorcycle engine? He said, yeah. He said, the specifications in the book matches up with the specifications of my motorcycle. So I said, I retrofitted it to make it fit on here. He said, well, did you start it up? Did it turn? He said, yeah. He said, you're here. You take the key, you start it up and see what happens. He put the key in, turned the motor, and it spin around. And to Mr. Snyder's surprise, he was blunt. He was literally flabbergasted. He couldn't believe it. But there it is. He said, yeah. And he said, now he said, to prove whether it'll fly, now we need to get it out to Washington Park Field here in Chicago and see if it'll fly. He said, you know how to fly it too? He said, no, that's why I got you here.
My guest tonight is Tyrone Haymore.
I want you to try to fly it, for we don't know how to fly now. He said, but if you all don't teach us how to fly, we may have to teach ourselves how to fly.
Tyrone is the curator. I just want to let people know who you are. You're the curator for the Robbins Historic Museum in Robbins, Illinois. Robbins is the home of a lot of famous people that people don't know about, as well as the home of the first African-American owned aviation school and airport. And he is telling the story of one of the founders. But I want to make sure that we hear about the other people, as well as invite people to go to your website. And if they are in the Chicago area, Robbins, Illinois is just south of the Windy City. And I have at the bottom of the screen the location of the museum in Robbins. I know that you would be glad to entertain those who come to visit and learn more about this very historic community.
It's a free museum.
It's a free museum.
Yes.
So you have the DeSable Museum there in Chicago, which is another African-American museum, and then the Robbins History Museum that really, you know, a community like Robbins it can be looked at as like the foundation for Black society, Black free society in America.
Yes, it's all Black, and at today's population, we've had a population of as high as almost 10,000 at one time in 1970, but it dropped drastically after 1970. But now it's starting to pick up a little bit. We're now at 6,633.
What do you think? So how is it being received, this effort to preserve and tell the history of Robbins, Illinois? How significant is this story to other communities like Robbins across the country?
It's very significant and very exciting. And the problem we have is trying to get the word out about Robbins. And we haven't been able to do that mainly for lack of funds and professional help. But now that we are starting to get more, we recently got a small grant that's going to help us move into a new facility that has already garnered a lot of media attention because we're going to be going into the mansion. We're going to be moving our small museum into a mansion that belonged to one of the wealthiest Black men in America, Mr. S.B. Fuller. And here's a photo of Mr. Fuller here. Mr. Fuller was a cosmetic and product manager, developer. Let's see, there we are there. And he became a multimillionaire with only a 6th grade education and $25 when he left home at the age of 17, literally walking from Louisiana to Chicago and making his fortune here in Chicago, selling soap and cosmetic. But he did it all from Robbins, Illinois. And he helped Robbins to get his first purified water system from the city of Chicago. Was one of the big things that Mr. Fuller helped with, as well as help provide fire trucks and air conditioning systems and He helped a lot of organizations in Robbins, and then a lot of people here, poor, most of all poor people, all jealous that this rich black man has came here poor. He came here poor, but now he's filthy rich, selling cosmetics products primarily to black women and men. But you heard of Dudley Products?
Yes.
Okay, this is the man who made Mr. Dudley. You heard of Salsheen Products?
Yes.
This is the man who made the Johnson brothers that produced Salsheen products.
Really?
Yes, this man, Mr. S.B. Fuller, he has produced a bunch of black multimedia, and he actually saved the Ebony magazine from closure when it first opened up. It had a massive fire that destroyed the whole building. It was Mr. Fuller who went to Mr. Johnson and loaned him money to rebuild the company, the
Really?
Ebony company. Yeah. And
your museum, with the Robbins Museum,
is going to be moving into his mansion. His mansion now is vacant, it's empty, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's a picture here. Let's see. I'll try to get it like that. Okay, there's the mansion there, and up at the top is our current museum. This is our current museum. But we're going to be moving into this building here as soon as we finish the repairs that are necessary. We need about $500,000 to repair this house. It looks like a Frank Lloyd Wright style home, but it is not a Frank Lloyd Wright. It was built by a man named Elmer Carlson in 1958 at the cost of only $250,000. But it's a multi-million-dollar home now, today. And we got a small
50s
remodeling, getting it ready. Hopefully this time next year, we hope to be in there.
Excellent. Who are some of the other notables from Robbins, Illinois, that
we have
significant?
Well, in addition to the airport that was later established by Robinson and Coffee, they like I said, was the story with Bessie Coleman and all. They couldn't. They were going to try to build after they finally were admitted to the school. The school finally admitted them when they saw they had built this little small airplane that flew, and they decided to have a night class for black, but they wouldn't let them mix with the white students at the school, so they had to come to night classes. But they finished their course in record time. They were licensed, and then they decided to leave there and start opening up their own airport somewhere in Chicago. But the city of Chicago played the race card on them too, and did not allow them to build an airport in Chicago. And it was Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek. You may know her, and I'll get a picture of her out here. They decided that they would get out of Chicago. They heard about a little black town south of Chicago called Robbins, Illinois. And these were the officials at the time. I don't know if you see that. Okay. That's Thomas Keller. He was the founder of Robbins. And these are the two men here. Now, they may look white, but they're black. Because Robbins was started by a lot of interracially looking blacks, people who look white. But those are the men there. And this is the house that that's still standing in Robbins, that they had their meetings in. We call it the birthplace of Robbins now, but that's the building there that's still standing today where they actually had the meeting that then later incorporated the village of Robbins. So
has that been renovated? Has that structure been renovated?
Yes. Yeah.
What do they use that for now?
It's rented out. It's rented out to tenants.
It's a home?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So yes, so they came to Robbins and they spoke to the mayor, but the mayor at that time was not Keller. It was a man named Samuel Nichols, who happened to be the father of movie actress Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek. If you're familiar with Star Trek, let's see, there's a picture there of her right here. Oops.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Her father was the mayor of Robbins at the time that the aviation guys came to Robbins and asked for permission to build an airport and an aviation school in Robbins. Mr. Nichols told him, he said that will we give you permission to do it? Absolutely. Not only will we give you permission, we're going to help you build it. You're going to need help. He said, and the whole town of Robbins literally got behind those two black guys that finally got their license to fly airplanes from the Wright School in Chicago, and came to Robbins and were allowed to build the airport. And Mr. Robinson, one of the two men, I did not know him personally, but I knew his partner, Coffee. Now here's another photograph. These are the four people principally responsible for the building of the Robbins Airport. Let's see, that's Johnny Robinson there. That's the one that became the janitor at the school. And then that's his partner here is Coffee, Cornelius Coffee. And then they trained, when they were allowed to train the first aviation blacks class, when they were accepted at the school and they got their license, they started the first black aviation class. This lady, Janet Braggs here, was one of the people in that class. And later they got Willa Brown involved. And all four of them became licensed pilots that came to Robbins, built an airport in Robbins in 1931. And there it is there. There's one of a few pictures that was taken at the airport. It wasn't finished when a windstorm 2 years later in 1933 tore it all down.
Oh, no.
And they moved their operations to an existing airport not too far from Robbins called the 87th and Harlem Street Airport. They moved all their operations there rather than trying to rebuild the Robbins Airport. But here's the picture I was looking for. This is the picture of Sam Nichols. This is the father of Nichelle Nichols, the man who gave permission for the Robbins Airport to be built. He's the father of the movie actress Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek. Let's see if you can see that. There we are. Can you see that?
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Tyrone Haymore, he is a historian, and as you have been able to listen to, well-versed in the history of this community, Robbins, Illinois. Mr. Haymore, I know we could talk for a lot longer, but what do you say to people in communities across the country who may know significant contributions of African Americans in their communities, but the information is not being preserved? People are dying.
Yeah.
And we're losing so much of that. So how do you, what do you say to those people?
Investigate the important black people in your town that are doing something that seems worthwhile, and see if you can promote it some kind of way. You know, it's shocking what you might find. You will be pleasantly surprised that there's a lot of closet geniuses in our town who happen to be black. And,
well, even as we saw the movie Hidden Figures, and I think about that movie and those women and all the people that they were related to who knew that those women worked at NASA. But we never heard about them.
Right.
And why families don't talk about the significance of people in their families is quite amazing. You know, one of our gifts is storytelling. Yeah. And that we are leaving that those significant stories. Just because it wasn't in somebody else's history book does not mean that it's not significant. Mr. Tyrone Haymore is the curator and a historian, the driving force of the Robbins History Museum, Robbins community formed by African Americans in 1892, governed by African Americans, incorporated by African Americans. There is a museum. As you mentioned, you're in the throes of a fundraising effort to renovate a mansion that was donated so that you can expand, so you can house more historical facts about this community and encourage others across the country to do the same in their community. Sir, we salute you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
The Robbins Historic Museum at 3644 West 139th Street, Robbins, Illinois. If you'd like to get in touch with Mr. Haymore, the number is 708-359-8701. All the way from Robbins, Illinois. Mr. Haymore, we thank you for being a part of the Timbuktu Report tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And for all of you who are watching via Facebook or on YouTube, we really, really do appreciate you joining us for this edition of the Timbuktu Report. Our goal at the Timbuktu Report is to inform, educate, and inspire. And I know you were informed, educated, and inspired tonight by Mr. Tyrone Haymore. We really, really do appreciate you watching and look forward to you joining us again. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing at the well. Make it a great moment.